right, so you like true crime. Well, we're going to unpack a really unsettling case today. It's one of the most haunting unsolved cases in American history, the Keddie Cabin murders.
Ooh.
Picture this. It's 1981. You're in Keddie,
Okay.
a quiet vacation spot nestled in the California mountains.
Sounds peaceful.
Right. Idyllic, even. But for the Sharp family, this serene setting would become a horrifying nightmare.
Yeah, you know what's so unsettling about the Keddie Cabin case? It's that contrast. You have this peaceful mountain community, then bam, this brutal crime.
Exactly. It really does shatter that illusion of safety, doesn't it? Like, makes you question whether anywhere is truly safe.
Absolutely.
So the Sharps, Sue, the mother, and her 5 kids.
5 kids, wow.
John, Sheila, Tina, Rick, and Greg. They were looking for a fresh start in Keddie, renting cabin 28, hoping for a brighter future. But on the night of April 11th, 1981, everything went wrong. Terribly wrong.
So how did the night start?
Well, it started ordinarily enough.
Yeah.
John, he is the eldest son, went out with his friend Dana Wingate. They were going to hang out in Quincy, a nearby town. Sheila, the daughter, she was at a sleepover.
Okay.
So Sue was at the cabin with the 3 younger
And
boys,
3 younger ones.
Rick, Greg, and their friend Justin Smart.
All right.
But then what started as just your average Saturday night turned into something horrifying, like a scene straight out of a horror movie. The next morning, Sheila came back home and found her mother, brother John, and Dana brutally murdered.
Oh my gosh.
And they were in the living room.
In the living room?
It's a horrific scene.
Yeah.
Blood everywhere, weapons on it, a hammer, and a steak knife bent out of shape. Can you imagine? From the force of the attack, it's hard to even imagine walking into that.
It really speaks to just the sheer rage and violence of the crime, the multiple weapons, the overkill, the brutality of it all. This wasn't just a random act. It was targeted. This was personal.
Absolutely. And then on top of it all, to add to the horror, 12-year-old Tina was missing. Gone without a trace. So you have a triple homicide and a missing child, all in this seemingly peaceful vacation community.
It's just unbelievable. And the worst part is, the Plumas County Sheriff's Office's initial response really didn't help. Mishandled evidence, missed opportunities, and a lack of urgency. It seems like they really hindered the investigation from the get-go.
And then there's that other unsettling detail. The 3 younger boys were sleeping in another room, and they apparently slept through the entire attack. How is that even possible?
It's almost impossible to comprehend, right? But it really just shows how complex trauma can be, especially for children. Their young minds might have just shut down.
As a coping mechanism.
Yeah, blocking out the horrors happening so close to them.
So let's break down each victim. Sue, the mother, she was found bound.
Bound with what?
Electrical wire. And gagged. She had been stabbed multiple times in the chest and neck.
The way she was bound, the number of stab wounds, it just screams personal vendetta. They wanted her to suffer.
Yeah, and John, her 15-year-old son, he was bludgeoned with a hammer and his throat was slit. And his friend Dana suffered a similar fate. Multiple skull fractures. They really beat him savagely.
It makes you think maybe they were collateral damage. Maybe they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, it's possible. So obviously they needed to find Tina. But they also needed to find out who could have done something so horrific. And 2 names immediately came up.
Okay, who?
Martin Smart.
Okay.
He was Justin's stepfather.
Okay.
And his friend, Bo Bubading.
And why those 2?
Well, both of them had troubled pasts, history of violence. Marty, he reportedly had a lot of anger towards Sue. He even allegedly threatened her, just days before the murders. And Bo, he had a record too. A reputation for being volatile. But wait, it gets even more complicated. Justin, the boy who slept through the murders.
Yeah.
Well, he later started having these really disturbing dreams and recalling some fragmented memories.
Oh, wow.
And some people think these memories might hold clues about what happened.
Yeah. But are those memories reliable? Childhood trauma can really distort things. Perception, memory, it's hard to know what's real and what's not.
It's true. But here's what's really eerie. Justin describes seeing 2 men fighting. One had a mustache and the other had long hair.
And that description, that sounds a lot like Marty and Bo.
Right. Gives you chills.
It does. But we have to be careful, right? These are just fragments, glimpses through the eyes of a traumatized child. We have to consider all possibilities.
Right. And we can't forget about Tina. 3 years after the murders, in 1984, they found her skeletal remains near Camp 18, about 50 miles away from Keddie. It just adds another layer of horror to this already tragic case.
It really does. And her remains being found so far away, it brings up so many new questions. Was she taken from the cabin that night? Was her disappearance a separate incident? And what about that anonymous tip that led investigators to her remains? Who was that person? Why wait so long to come forward?
It's like every new piece of information, instead of solving anything, just makes it more complex, harder to figure out.
Cases like this are like that. They really challenge us, challenge our assumptions about human nature, our belief that things make sense in the world. The Keddie Cabin murders, they really are a chilling reminder that darkness can be anywhere, and that some secrets, they may never be revealed. Finding Tina's remains just throws everything we thought we knew out the window. It's like there had to be some planning involved, right? To take her all that way, that wasn't clear at the cabin.
It's almost like we're looking at two different crimes. You've got the murders at the cabin, and then you have Tina's abduction and death. But are they connected? Same person or people? It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is a puzzle. So many pieces are missing. But, that's part of what makes this case so fascinating. It's like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle where some of the pieces have just vanished. We're stuck with just these fragments of information.
Okay, so we had the brutality of the attack on Sue, John, and Dana. That points to a personal motive, maybe revenge. But then you've got Tina's abduction and the fact that her remains were found so far away. It almost feels more sinister, doesn't it? Like maybe someone with a more, a more disturbed mind.
Exactly. And that's where all the different theories about the Keddie Cabin murders come in.
Right.
You have some people who think it was a crime of passion, driven by anger and jealousy, maybe stemming from Marty's alleged resentment towards Sue.
Yeah. Others think it was just random, a random act of violence. Maybe some drifters passing through the area. Or someone who had a history of violence against women. And then there's that theory that there was more than one attacker. Which would maybe explain the different weapons, the level of violence.
Right. Each theory has its pros and cons, but none of them fully explain everything. The missing motive, the missing murder weapons. You've got the conflicting witness accounts, that anonymous tip about Tina's remains. It just makes for a very perplexing and frustrating puzzle.
It's like the investigators were just chasing shadows from day one. The messed up evidence at the crime scene, the conflicting witness statements, the focus on certain suspects, and then shifting gears when Tina's remains were found. It all just feels so chaotic. And that's really lingered over the case for decades.
And that chaos makes it almost impossible to tell what's real and what's not. The Keddie Cabin murders have just become a breeding ground for all these conspiracy theories, which makes it even harder to get to the truth.
It's fascinating, but so frustrating, Like you get drawn into this web of mystery, but the more you pull at it, the more tangled it becomes.
Yeah. It really feels like the truth is just out of reach, hidden behind all this time and misinformation. But that doesn't mean we stop looking for answers.
Of course not. And, in recent years, there has been a renewed interest in the case. Part of that's thanks to advances in forensics. But it's also the amateur sleuths, the true crime fans who are determined to keep this case in the spotlight.
The Plumas County Sheriff's Office has actually reopened the case. They're looking at the evidence again using DNA analysis. They're hoping to finally shed some light on this decades-old mystery.
But even with those advancements, so much time has passed. Evidence gets lost, memories fade, people disappear. But maybe somewhere there's something. Maybe it's hidden in some file, an evidence box. Maybe it's in the memory of someone who's been holding on to a secret all these years. Maybe that's the key to unlocking this case.
And that's what keeps us coming back, right? That hope that justice, even if it's delayed, is still possible. Maybe even the most complex puzzles can be solved if we just keep at it.
Going through all of this, I can't stop thinking about the boys. Those boys sleeping in the other room. They say they slept through it all. But is that even possible with all that violence going on?
It's the question, isn't it? Some experts say it's possible. Maybe they were in a deep sleep. Maybe they saw or heard something earlier and they were just traumatized. Or maybe they were even drugged and genuinely didn't hear anything.
Yeah. Or maybe they did hear something. Maybe even saw something. But they were too afraid to react. Too scared to make a sound. It's a chilling thought.
Oh, absolutely. Can you imagine being a child in the middle of something so horrible? You know something awful is happening, but you're paralyzed by fear. You can't call for help. It just shows how powerful, how unpredictable trauma can be, especially for kids.
So their silence, it becomes another piece of this puzzle, maybe a really important piece. But without their cooperation, or maybe if they recover repressed memories, we may never know what really happened that night.
It reminds us that sometimes, with cases like this, the truth is hard to come by. We have to consider everything, even the most uncomfortable possibilities. And sometimes those answers we're looking for, they might stay hidden forever.
It's like the cabin itself knows what happened, but it's not telling. All we have are these little pieces of information, these glimpses into this horrific night, and we're trying to put it all together, but it just doesn't quite fit.
That's what makes a cold case so compelling, right? You get sucked in. You obsess over every detail, every little thing, every possible scenario. But sometimes, even when we try our hardest, some mysteries just aren't meant to be solved.
The Keddie Cabin murders have become this, legend in the world of true crime. It keeps people fascinated, but also frustrated.
Yeah, it really sparks a lot of debate, so many theories, and people just want answers. I think at its core, it plays on our deepest fears, the unknown, the thought that violence can happen even in the safest places, and that sometimes there's no explanation, no justice.
And for the victims' families, it must be unbearable knowing that their loved ones were murdered, that whoever did it might still be out there, living their life, never brought to justice. I can't even imagine.
Absolutely, and that's why we can't give up. Even with all the challenges, the time that's passed, memories fading, evidence lost, we owe it to the victors and their families to keep looking for those answers.
So what do you think? If you were working on this case, where would you start? What would you focus on? Would you dig into Marty and Beau's past, try to find a solid connection to the murders, or would you go back to that anonymous tip about Tina? Maybe that's the key to figuring this all out.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? And that's what I love about cases like this. It turns everyone into a detective. We can all analyze the evidence, think about the possibilities, come up with our own theories. Even if we never know for sure what happened, it's the journey, that pursuit of the truth. It's intellectually stimulating, but it can be emotional too.
It reminds us that true crime is more than just a genre, you know what I mean? It's not just entertainment. It shows us the dark side of humanity. It reflects our fears. And in a way, it reminds us that some mysteries may never be solved.
It also shows us that even when faced with something truly horrific, there's always hope that maybe someday the truth will come out.
The Keddie Cabin murders are a haunting reminder that some secrets stay hidden, and some questions will never be answered. But the search for answers goes on. True crime, no bull.